Hello.
This is Marley,
And I'm Scruffy.
and you're listening to Hitbox.
Yes, season 2.
Season 2, episode 4.
4.
I want to say 4.
4.
A warning, I have very bad allergies right now, so you can probably already tell, but I'm a little sniffly, so forgive me for that.
Well,
Yeah.
that unfortunately segues into today's topic, which is hazards.
Better watch out.
Our favorite video game hazards, our favorite types of hazards, and just what they bring to games. And by hazards, we specifically would mean something that's a trap or a threat for your player character without necessarily being a character.
Yeah, so usually this means like it's embedded into the environment, or it's something, it doesn't have AI, like it's not programmed to necessarily attack you. It
Right.
could be, but it's not an enemy.
Right.
Yeah, a trap,
Yes.
as you said.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And in that vein, I suppose we'll go ahead and get started with Mario Kart.
Yeah.
As this is a game that is rife with hazards both in the track and that you can create for other racers via
Absolutely.
items. Did you want to go ahead? I think I feel like your hazard in this is a bit more universal.
I'm trying not to sneeze. Give me a moment. Okay, I'm back. So I chose banana peels in Mario Kart. So if you'll remember from most of the Mario Kart games, you don't have to drop banana peels. They're kind of one of the items that can just be found like around most of the. I don't know if there's any track that doesn't have them.
Banana peels?
Yeah. Can you think of any?
There's no track that doesn't allow them, and I think they've been in every Mario Kart game, including the
banana
arcade
peels.
titles.
Arcade titles. Wow. Okay. Well, the Mario Kart I grew up with was Mario Kart DS. And the thing I like about banana peels is that if you're not experienced, they're a pain in the ass. But if you are experienced enough, you can really use them to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you spin around them or whatever, and you're kind of like direct. Or my favorite thing to do was because when you get a banana, it's not the best power up, right? It's probably one of the worst ones, just because like what's the point?
It's one of the least powerful ones, that's for sure.
But my favorite thing to do was if I got a bunch of bananas, I would make a line of bananas.
Yeah.
Like across the track. So it's sort of like an impenetrable banana
Yeah.
wall, a banana wall. I like the banana peels because I think it's a good way to how should I word this? It's a good way to introduce you to the idea of items.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not going to set you back too much, but they're definitely annoying, and they're enough to like make you lose your place, but they're also comedic and they fit in almost every environment. So you're not like trying to stretch to explain why there's one in the middle of, except for Rainbow Road, I would argue. Like, I don't know, there's a banana
Who's
up
eating
there.
bananas?
Donkey Kong, what you doing?
On that note, in Double Dash, every character would get a special item that's unique to them. And for Donkey Kong, it was this big banana peel. And most of the banana peels have little smiley faces on them. This one has an angry face on it.
Oh my god.
And the gimmick was that if you ran into it, not only would you spin out twice, it would also break up into 3 smaller banana peels. So
hubris.
Yeah, that was an interesting and very annoying take on the banana peel, but I say annoying, but endearingly. It was.
Yeah. It introduces a scary concept, which is not only do these bananas have some form of sentience, which most things in Mario games do, but they can reproduce asexually.
Oh my goodness.
Which makes me nervous. Because what if the world is just plagued by smaller and smaller banana peels?
What if they're just sitting there while we're looking at them, but when we aren't looking, they just get up on the peel parts and start, walking around.
Like the angels from Doctor Who? That's terrifying. Oh my god.
Anyway.
Yeah, sorry. Segue.
There's another thing that you can do with bananas because they're not just hazards for players. They're also hazards for other items.
That's true, yeah.
So
they're versatile.
Yeah. So one thing you do in the later Mario Kart titles is you hold a banana, or I guess in any Mario game or Mario Kart game, you can hold a banana in your inventory, and then release it right as something is about to come up behind you.
Oh.
And that will destroy, one hazard will destroy the next. In most cases, a blue shell,
right.
Something like a blue shell will not be phased by a banana.
Yeah, by the mere standards of a simple banana.
Right. And another dynamic in that sense is there are ways to counter a banana. If you have a hazard that's powerful enough, you can get rid of a banana. Or if you have a star, an invincibility star, then you can just drive right through a banana.
Or a bullet bill, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the later games, you can transform. If you're in a lower place, you can transform into a bullet bill with a special item and just drive a lot faster, and it drives for you. It's kind of nice.
Yeah. I think Mario Kart games are also really rife with fun hazards. They can get irritating. Like whenever any track has like cavernous holes in it, I get so nervous because I'm decent at Mario Kart. I don't like drift a lot or anything. I'm very much like, okay, shortest path.
Yeah.
But anytime there's like Rainbow Road was always really hard for me. I think actually the newer Rainbow Roads are harder because there are a lot of direct turns.
Yeah.
But the chasm, it's not so much that I could fall into it. It's that when they try to pick you up, they take forever to drop you back down.
Yes.
I think that's the quickest way to lose place.
You lose so much time.
Yeah, you're gone after that. Like that's it.
One of my favorite hazards in the Mario Kart series, it's kind of specific, but it's the Bowser statues that appear in several iterations of Bowser's Castle across the Mario Kart series. There's one in Bowser's Castle in Mario Kart Double Dash once again. That was my first Mario Kart game. And it's just this big, classic Bowser pose statue that swings right and left and shoots lava bubbles at you.
Ugh.
And at one point they're coming head on, and then you take a U-turn, or I'm sorry, a hairpin turn, and you're driving along with them. So they're hazards twice, which I found to be pretty cool. Another iteration was this really big polygonal Bowser statue in the Mario Kart Wii version of Bowser's Castle that was animated.
Oh.
It actually moved back and forth, and every so often it would reach out and blow this giant ball of lava.
That's utterly terrifying.
Yeah, and it would bounce. It would bounce across the stage.
Oh, God.
And you had this big track leading up to it. And the Bowser statue, for me, the reason it's one of my favorites is because it signifies how Mario Kart tracks turn into more and more like roller coaster tracks.
Yes, that's something I really like about them.
These big buildups of long roads and then a huge hazard at the end that's attracting your attention, showing you where to go, but also presenting danger that makes you weave around this long track. And another, a really cool iteration of Bowser was his statue's appearance in Mario Kart 8, where it's this giant molten, rocky version of Bowser that just continually punches the opposite sides of the road that forks around him. So he punches one side of the road ripples.
Oh, God.
And then he punches the next one, and he just keeps doing that, and you can hear his echoes of his roar throughout the castle.
Oh, my God.
But arriving at that and seeing this long road up to him and then having to time it to avoid getting punched, it feels like a roller coaster, It feels like you're on this track towards this menacing presence. And yes, unlike a roller coaster, it actually can punch you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like an animatronic gone wrong.
Right, exactly, yeah.
What if it was, Pirates of the Caribbean, but one of them gets up and just socks you in the face? What if the Yeti from the Matterhorn could escape and will get you?
It's just I love that hazard because of the spectacle, and just how it creates this narrative of a roller coaster that you're following every time you enter a Mario Kart track.
I love that. I do have a bad joke I'm gonna share.
Let's hear it.
I'm not gonna say the whole Ozymandias poem, but I just want to say, because it's a Bowser statue, that it should definitely be labeled, "Look upon my works, ye Mario, and despair." Thank you.
Yes, very, very well done.
Thank you. And apologies for all the sneezing I'm doing in the background.
That's the worst kind of hazard.
That is the worst. The worst kind of hazard was inside of you all along. Do we want to keep talking about some other Mario Kart stuff, or do you want to keep the ball rolling?
Let's keep the ball rolling.
Let's keep this ball rolling.
We only have an hour here this time,
yeah,
so
unfortunately,
we're gonna try and cover as many hazards as we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your turn.
All right. So one I'm gonna bring up, and this might seem like a funny one, but I think it's actually really interesting in terms of gameplay and how you design a game, is anything taller than the player when you're in a game in which you can't jump. So recently I played Untitled Goose Game, which is amazing. I found out I'm really good at that game, which I wasn't expecting.
You're good at being a goose.
I'm good at being a goose. I was like, you know what? I'm not a great stealth game player. I prefer like combat. I don't know about this one. I rule at that game. Anyway, that game is really fun because you're a goose. You're small. You have to crouch down to pick some things up, and you have to stretch out to take some things from up high. And you genuinely can't. You can flap your wings, but like you can't jump over hedges. You can't get onto top of things without making a ramp.
Right.
And it takes the fact that it's a puzzle game and implements that into every aspect of the environment.
Yeah.
So even if you're just transferring from one location to the next, every single part of it feels like a puzzle game, which I find really satisfying.
Yeah. I guess that's more of an obstacle.
Yeah.
But there's still it still means that it traps you with hazards.
There's a hazardous, because something that happened to me a lot was I'd wait for the perfect moment to pull off my goose heist, and I'd get the goose heist item from the goose heist victim.
Yes.
And I'd be squawking and flapping away, and they run much faster than you. They're humans, and you're a goose.
Right.
And then you have less control when you're going quicker. I'd run into a hedge and get kind of stuck in it next to a fence, because you can get trapped in corners, and they'd get me or they'd shoo me out, and it was really frustrating. A better example of this, I guess, would be something like I was also for Halloween rewatching some Resident Evil 4 clips because my sister and I play that together.
Yeah.
And I realized that you can't like jump in those games. I mean, you can jump off of things, but you can't like climb.
Right.
Like if you're stuck, because a lot of horror games now, like you have a pretty free range of motion.
Yeah.
There's a few probably where you can't really scale things.
Yeah.
But this one felt very weird because you're in this like absurd church mansion-y place, which is what every Resident Evil game is set in. And there's so many things theoretically you could like climb on or go through a window, and you just can't.
Yeah.
Which is really funny. And those locations also have a lot of traps, like descending spikes and like whatnot. And I'm like, dude, if I could just leap this fence, my life would be so much better. I could just book it. You know what I mean? So I think that's an interesting. I think some games make it, like Untitled Goose Game, make that really work for them.
Right.
And it has there's a in-game reason why you can't leap that fence because you're a goose.
Yeah.
But when you get into like action games and horror games, it starts making less sense, and it's actually something I found kind of irritating, unless it's done so like purposefully, and the rest of the game is so enjoyable because of that extra level of difficulty.
Yeah.
Because then you can kind of mask it. I guess this also happens in like Zelda games a little
I was
bit.
just about to say, yeah.
Yeah, like I was playing Link's Awakening recently, and I was reminded of, and this is true of the DS games too, and I'm sure the Game Boy, like the older ones, sometimes you come across a cliff where you could theoretically like leap down to the next portion, but you can't. You have to go find a slope and then go down the slope.
Right, right.
And I'm like, come on, dude. Come on, buddy. You
That's
can
not
do
always
it.
the case.
Not always, no.
But yeah, I guess it's adjacent to a hazard
It is.
because it boxes you in.
Yeah, it can force you into hazards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in an Untitled Goose Game, there's no like sort of loss condition. I mean, you can fail in that you never finish, but you can't die in that game.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get kicked out and like fully from the village. I don't think that's possible. That would be interesting though if it worked like more Hitman style.
You were exiled.
Like you were exiled, mission failed. That would be so funny. That would be hilarious. But yeah, I think the idea of like you have to be really smart about your surroundings, not because the walls themselves are hazard, but because a hazard could come at any moment and the walls won't help you in any way. I think that's interesting. I think I like when games use it, but I also think like story-wise and mechanically you have to think through why you made that the decision.
Yeah.
Otherwise it feels very clunky and like, oh shit, like that's just mean. Like you're just mean. Like that doesn't make any sense. It takes you out of the sort of suspension of disbelief of it. But when it works and it's really funny and it makes you think more about where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's great when it's not just arbitrary invisible walls that you can't overcome.
Oh my god. Yeah. In I don't know if it was in Oblivion and Skyrim I used to always go to the furthest part of the map to try to see other regions because we'd seen them in other games. And they would always block it off with like an enormous cliff or an enormous mountain range or something.
Yeah.
I hate that. I know in like Red Dead Redemption 2 and 1, if you try to go past the boundaries before the story wants you to, you just get shot a bunch of times. I'm like, all right, guys. Okay, let's cool it, okay? I can climb that mountain. Just give me a second. Let me do the diagonal horse run up, and then we'll see what happens. Yeah.
All right. So here's a kind of hazard type, and I know I'm not going to cover all examples with what I'm listing here. I wouldn't have time. So I'll just list some of my favorites. This hazard type is any kind of swarm of small creatures that are indestructible.
Oh.
So like a swarm of creatures that just completely covers an area of ground, and that area of ground is now off limits.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying, but it's done really interestingly.
Yeah.
Whenever this pops up, I'm always fascinated by how developers handle it.
Yeah.
In Super Mario 3D World, which was what the intro music came from, you have this stage called Fuzzy Time Mine, which has a bunch of creatures called fuzzies. And they're kind of these weird-looking, bug-eyed creatures that are just spiky balls of fluff.
Like tribbles.
Yeah, a bit like that. And
puffles.
they kind of form into this pool of fuzzies.
Which is now kind of scary.
Yes. And what's even scarier is that in this stage, they are rising.
Oh my god.
Slowly. But they're kind of like a rising lava in that case. There's nothing you can do about them. You have to simply gun it to get to higher ground.
That is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. But it's interesting that they didn't go with something like lava or rising poison or something like that. And they do that in other stages. But you hear the music, like you hear this like this rushed, very agitated theme, and you see that you have 100 seconds on the clock, and you see these monstrous faces just like rising up towards you. I feel like that gets me going more than lava, you know? That gets me running.
Yeah, absolutely.
As soon as the clock
starts. It's like a Rat King.
Yeah,
you know, about the Rat King. That's terrifying.
Yeah. There's another example of it that's a bit more complex that I remember from Ratchet and Clank, A Crack in Time.
Which I've heard a lot about these games, and I've never played them, and and I feel like I missed out on something.
A Crack in Time is super cool for one specific part of it, which is time travel puzzles.
Ooh.
And like recording yourself doing something in time and then resetting and having
now
that
we're cooking
recording
with
and
gas.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
But this is a completely different part of the game where you are exploring this cave and there's these creatures called tetramites. And instead of just covering the ground outright, they will not appear until they sense you on the ground. And they have some rules to them. So they'll come out of this like termite mound sort of thing. They'll start spreading. They're much faster than you, so they'll spread across the ground pretty quick. And they'll instantly like kill you if you get too close, and you can't do anything. You can't fight fire, or you can't fight back.
Yeah.
They're indestructible.
Yeah.
But they hate water. So if you can get
like,
across a
push 'em?
water source, they won't come near. They won't follow.
Interesting.
And they love nectar. So eventually you get this gun that can deposit liquid. Like you can collect different types of liquid, oil, water, and nectar, and you can disperse them somewhere else. So you can distract tetramites temporarily by placing down this nectar decoy, or even you can place nectar onto this like organic web that's blocking a path, and the tetramites will eat it away. So
I like this. I like this idea, and this comes up with a lot of hazards we talk about of like you can use them to your advantage.
yes, yeah. I think that's where hazards really shine.
Yeah, absolutely.
The enemies of the developers, the enemies who are the developers have set up this trap for you, and then you find a way to spin it and get closer to the sweet candy center.
Sweet candy center.
But yeah, that's why I really enjoy that hazard. And yeah, please experiment more with swarms of things as a hazard, because there's really interesting ways to work that.
In real life, it's very scary. Have you ever been swarmed by bees?
I have witnessed.
Oh, man.
Fortunately, I have not been swarmed by bees.
I used to play travel softball, and sometimes there'd be just a lot of bees because people eat a lot of food at tournaments. And I distinctly remember once we had a tournament, and there was this big swarm of bees, and they weren't like coming towards us, but they covered like an umbrella, and it was probably the grossest thing I've ever laid eyes on. I have also witnessed a spider like nest exploding, and that is not something I would ever wish on anyone.
Yeah.
So like, this is a good hazard.
Apologies to any viewers who.
Oh God,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Listener discretion
is
advised.
Oh gosh. Everything was fine. It's just very scary.
Yes.
So this is a good hazard. I think it's creepy.
It's an effective hazard. I'll say that. Yeah.
It's creepy without being terrifying.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah. And both of those games handle it in very easy, accessible ways, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, they come off as dangerous, but not like creepy or terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to you before we talk any more about insect swarms.
Yeah, pardon my sniffles once again. So this one kind of relates in that they're not really enemies. I don't consider them enemies, but they're sort of like in-game creatures that you can move around and sometimes like use for your advantage. I did turrets from the Portal games. Now the Portal games have a lot of hazards because there's not a lot of things actively trying to kill you except for, GLaDOS. So he's actually full of traps, but they're ones you're supposed to solve, so it's a little different. But I like turrets. I've always really liked turrets because I think, one, they're really clever game design because they're so cute and they're so funny. And they have these like, hello?
Exactly.
Hello? Oh, no. Like cute little voices that so makes you not want to kill them.
Yeah.
And you don't ever really kill them.
You just turn them off.
Exactly.
By knocking them over.
And then they get like, oh, no. It's very sad.
Yeah.
I feel the same guilt in doing that as I do like stomping on a Goomba. I'm like, you're so cute. Why am I doing this to you?
Yeah.
But you have to. But I like them as a hazard because they're there are some that kind of rotate, but they're based in whatever location they're in. So it's not like they're gonna chase you. They're not like coming after
Right,
you.
right.
Which is why I consider them a hazard.
Yeah.
They're not like searching for you.
Right.
Kind of.
Their character does not affect gameplay necessarily.
No, and you can use them to your advantage. Like
Yeah.
if you need like a I can't remember what everything is called in Portal right now, but if you need a laser in a certain spot, you can use their laser and, set up portals.
That's true, yeah.
You can also send one flying. You can use one to press a button. Like, there's so many ways you could use them.
You can knock one into another.
Yeah.
And defeat both of them at once.
Yeah. And I also just think they're really good indications of the environment itself, because we are technically talking about like environmental hazards.
Yes.
They advance the plot line and gameplay of the game without putting it in your face a lot, because you sort of start to see Aperture Science's like creepy side with them.
Yeah.
Because you start to wonder, like, do they have personalities?
And then
also, who's in those personalities?
Right. And you also wonder, like, why? Why did they put these here?
Yeah.
Why did they fill these things with bullets? Like, were they expecting anyone to solve this test over the threat of death?
I know, exactly. And they also sound miserable, and I'm like, aw. But then at the end, you do get to see them not trying to kill you at one point. And I don't actually like spoiling Portal, because they're such good games.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna say how, but they're just, it's like this little ecosystem of robots that lives there.
Yeah.
And you're just disturbing their peace a little bit.
Right.
And it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I also like how the designs for the two co-op players in Portal 2 kind of look like a mixture of turrets and the personality cores.
Yes. Yeah, they just look like recycled parts.
Yeah, which is great. I think it fits in with a sort of like robotic body horror feeling that a lot of Portal has.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're a really clever way to punish you in a way that is solvable, but also is a little bit of danger.
Yeah.
In a game that doesn't have a lot of immediate danger.
Yeah.
Like there's immediate danger when you're confronting bosses.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like, you can fall into things, like, you can die, obviously.
Right.
But there's no one's chasing you.
Right.
So this is a good way to add that sort of like enemy combat without there being enemy combat.
And there's still no one chasing you. It's great. I feel like they had this idea for a hazard.
Yeah.
And then they thought, let's add a little charm to it. Let's add a little character.
I love that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just darn cute too. Poor little guys.
Is
anybody there?
I don't hate you.
Yeah.
That's when you defeat one. Yeah.
Oh, it's so sad.
So that was a hazard where you can spin it to your advantage.
Absolutely.
I'm going to talk about a hazard where you can't spin it to your advantage, but if you're able to avoid it, you kind of get a last laugh at the dev team.
Ooh, okay.
This is any of the traps that ghosts set in the original Luigi's Mansion.
Amazing
I have
game.
not played Dark Moon. I have not played Luigi's Mansion 3. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to it yet.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my hands on that game.
But I do know about the first one. And boy, do they set up a lot of cheeky little traps.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
You can find doors that don't lead anywhere, and when you try to open them, they just like open 180 degrees and flatten you against the wall.
Those are the worst.
Yeah.
And you told me the trick to finding out if they're real is because they're not on... Go ahead.
Yes.
I'll let you say it.
You have a Game Boy. Luigi has a Game Boy Horror that shows a map of the whole mansion. And those fake doors will not appear as doors on the map.
Yeah, it's great.
That's how you can check. Another way you can check without checking the map is simply to try to vacuum the doors. If a door vibrates when you vacuum it, it's a real door.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then it's a fake door. So, and once you start to realize that pattern, I'm sorry, I've spoiled it for everyone.
It's an oldish game. That's
discovering that pattron allows you to say, now I know.
Yeah, I got you.
I'm not going to fall for that one again until you do. And
something I really like about Luigi's Mansion, I think they do continue this in the other games. They do a little bit based on the brief gameplay trailers I've seen of 3. is you can use mirrors to your advantage, but they can also be
Yes.
to your disadvantage, which I
Yes.
think is really interesting.
So you can use the Game Boy Horror to scan a room as well. Scan any object, and like with most objects, Luigi will offer some little like snide
Yeah,
comment
he's
on
the
it.
best in this game.
But if you scan a mirror, the reflection in the mirror will start to rotate, and then
Yeah.
these wisps will appear around your screen, and suddenly you're teleported back to
Uh-huh.
the foyer. Um, and
Which is not always what I wanted to do. I've done that
yeah,
by accident a
yeah,
few
oh
times.
yeah, I've done it by accident.
Especially on DS when the controls are a little more mechanical. They're
Mm-hmm.
not as organic.
But sometimes you want an easy way back to
Yeah.
square one, or sometimes you have to.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, sometimes
yeah.
you just you need to get back there fast if you're low on health, or let's say if you were trapped in a room.
Yes.
I'm not going to elaborate anymore on that. Yeah, it feels like a haunted mansion,
It
you know?
does.
But it
Yeah.
also feels like these ghosts are not scary. They're just
No.
pranksters.
They
you know?
are, and I also like how they'll like swing off of chandeliers at you.
Yeah,
And they'll like.
yeah.
I will say my least favorite boss is the baby one.
Chauncey.
Did not like that boss.
No?
Did not enjoy it. Had a bit of a hard time defeating it.
Yeah. He can be a hassle, yeah.
He's a hazard. I would even no, he's an enemy. But still, yeah, I think that game is really great at making you feel like genuinely this house has poltergeists in it.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
like just a set piece.
Right. And one other thing that you hear whenever you pull or mostly when you pull these traps, is laughter.
Yeah.
You hear ghost laughter.
Yeah.
So, like, that makes me think that there are ghosts that live here, the portrait ghosts, that are legitimately the scary ones, the ones,
Yeah.
and the boos, of course, are the ones
Yeah,
like
the
pulling
boos
the
are
strings.
the bad boys.
But then there's the regular like bedsheet ghosts that Luigi
Yeah.
finds in every room, and those guys are just there to have fun. You know, they're there to
Just guys
just
being
give them a
dudes.
good scare and laugh at it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I always think it's a little sad and creepy what you do to them.
Huh.
I mean, not any less sad and creepy than what like King Boo and stuff wants to do to you. So
Yeah.
like, it's fine.
Yeah,
But
they
but yeah.
shouldn't have tricked him in the first place. They shouldn't have created this hazard of a mansion.
no, yeah, that's true. That was rude. That was
It
just
was
plain
rude?
rude.
Yes,
Uncalled for, rude, despicable even.
you ruined his whole night.
Ruined his whole night. Man, you didn't even get to enjoy the mansion. You didn't even get to enjoy vacation.
Yeah.
Pardon me for a moment. Okay. Would we like to move on?
Yes, let's move on.
So let's see. I've got a few more I'd like to talk about. I think what I'm going to start in on, because both of us have stuff to say about this,
Okay.
is in stealth games.
Oh.
A lot of good stealth games are built around hazards.
Yeah.
Because the environment really affects like how you move around in it, and moving around is the core element of stealth games.
And in stealth games, you're a lot more sensitive to the environment.
Exactly. So we both kind of picked like two elements of this to talk about. Mine is being seen. So your big goal in stealth games is not to be noticed, right?
Yeah.
And I really like how they take this basic aspect, and I know this is how stealth works in real life, obviously, but I think so few games do this correctly. Like I'm thinking of Oblivion. It's so easy to sneak in that game. Like as long as you're not standing in front of someone and not crouching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, if you're not standing in front of someone and you're crouching, they're not gonna see you. You could steal whatever you want. It's super easy.
Yeah.
Which kind of takes away the joy of it, or like the satisfaction of it.
Yeah.
One game that does it spectacularly well is the Hitman series. Have you played any of the Hitman games?
I unfortunately have not.
I'd
really like to.
Freaking rule. So they're really simple. It's exactly what it sounds like. You play as a hitman. I'm not going to spoil who, because there is a campaign mode. There's a story. It's pretty interesting. And basically you get set up in these huge sprawling levels where every single person is an interactable NPC who you can kill or incapacitate, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And this level is full of hazards. Absolutely full of hazards. There's sparking plugs, there's cars left open, there's fried fish that you can whack people with, there's a set of golf clubs, there's holes you can open, there's even rakes you can place.
Goodness.
There's obviously guns and like the boring stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's almost comical. It has almost this level of like slapstickiness about it that I think is really fun, and it does make it feel like you're in like an old spy movie because a lot of stuff's kind of goofy.
Yeah.
But when you're really stealthy in that game, it does feel like you're like a super assassin.
Yeah.
It has this total level of like, oh my god, I'm dangerous. Like, I'm powerful.
Yeah.
And the way they do stealth is really interesting. So you have just let's see how to word this. The big part of that game, how you move around and how you stealth, is disguises. So as long as you're wearing a disguise, people think you're a certain person. And there's always going to be people, I think they're called noticers, who know you're not that person.
Oh.
But it changes per disguise you're in.
Okay.
Yeah. So it determines where you can go in each map.
Yeah.
But also, if someone sees you commit a crime in that disguise, you have to discard it.
I see.
Because then they won't tell. But you can only do that when you're hidden.
Yeah.
So like, there's so many levels of complication to it that it's completely nonsense that they wouldn't recognize you.
Right.
If but you know what I mean. But there's also a level of realism to it in that you can't just suddenly be wearing another outfit. You have to dispose. And if you dispose of someone, and I say that to include you can either kill them or incapacitate them, you have to hide them and all their stuff, or else someone will get suspicious.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's that part of it I think is really clever because it forces you to think logistically about outfits because you don't want to ruin one outfit by committing a bunch of crimes in it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's an important outfit to get into an area you want. And also, I don't know. It's just really funny. It's like you just killed, like there's one level, I think in the first Hitman, where you have to kill a chef. And the chef's standing in front of like the 3 employees he has talking to them. You lure him into the back, you kill him, you put on his outfit, and you come out, and nobody knows. And I'm like, cool. Sure. That's great. But on the other hand, when you're wearing the chef outfit, there'll be a woman who's your boss who definitely knows you're not the chef.
Okay.
So like it's clever in a lot of ways, but the ways it isn't so smart end up being kind of funny.
The food was a dead giveaway.
Oh my god, you were just sitting on that one. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, you've distracted me.
I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, so that's one element of it I really like. Another element I really like is just the way you can be seen is really nuanced in that like if you're committing a crime in a room but there's a window, people can see you. It's not like you're now hidden because you're in a separate room.
Yeah.
Or like if you're trying to pick a lock and there's people in a room, they're gonna notice you and be suspicious about it.
Right.
But they also give you a chance to like back away and act normal and blend in. And
right.
people are
Right.
like, okay, maybe I was the one who was being too suspicious.
Right.
Which, again, it's like such a great setup for a game in general, like trying to assassinate someone.
Yeah, yeah.
But the way they do it is it keeps a little bit of humor in it, so it never feels too grim, and it keeps an aspect of sort of like, this is a giant dangerous world, and how can I use it to my advantage, kind of sandbox part of it. But it also is really challenging because you're avoiding a lot of people, you have to hide around things, like there's a lot of dangerous elements to it. It's really easy to fail.
Right. And I really enjoy how the danger here isn't necessarily any of the dangerous, like physically dangerous objects you're interacting with.
Yeah.
It's the looming amount of suspicion and alertness.
And you can like keep building that suspicion.
Yeah.
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 Because you get more and more witnesses.
Right. that is a very interesting hazard. That's a very
Yeah.
interesting thing to call a hazard. But these people aren't enemies, you know, they're
No.
just passerby. So like there's danger in building attention.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really interesting.
It's so interesting, and you think about it at first, and you're like, that's just normal, right? And then you think about it, and you're like, not a lot of stealth games do that. It's a little more complicated, and I just really appreciate the amount of thought they put into it. They
Right.
also do warn you if someone's looking at you. Like you'll get a little
Oh,
notification like someone's looking at you.
interesting.
And you can be like, okay, straighten up, walk over here. They don't, nothing's happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I think is great. They also have really funny things you can do, in sort of a macabre way.
Mhm.
But the environment is hazardous to everyone, including you. So I watched someone play once, where they were fumigating a house and they put poison into the house because they needed to get everyone inside of it,
Oh.
which was super clever. You do not have to do it that way.
Yeah.
And you pick up these hints based on what's around you and the way people are talking.
Mhm.
But then they went into the house before it had been the fumigation had kicked in because they wanted to go get something.
Mhm.
And it was fumigated while they were in it and they died too. So like you're not immune,
Yeah.
which is great. So it's like it's almost a comedic look at how hazardous a lot of the world is if you're just kind of dumb about it,
Yeah.
which I really enjoy. So I think it's
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
comedic instance of hazards.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. A narrative instance of
Narrative
purely
instance.
narrative instance of hazards.
Yeah, it's a mixture of James Bond and like Buster Keaton, which
Yeah.
are two things I love. So, you know.
Absolutely. Now, yes, I wanted to talk about a aspect of hazards in stealth games, and definitely I like this. Continuing with this idea of suspicion and
Yeah.
alertness in particular being the big hazard in a stealth game.
Absolutely.
I wanted to talk about how making noise is something that
Yeah.
can cause that. It's sort of a what's the phrase? A causal hazard.
Uh-huh.
It will lead to the danger.
A hazard being created.
Yeah. So noise becomes something that you avoid as though it's a physical hazard. In games where it keeps track of your noise, that is. Some of my favorite examples, I got to bring up Breath of the Wild,
Oh, absolutely.
where you have a little meter that tracks your noise. And stealth isn't all that important to the game, but when you realize you have an opportunity for stealth, suddenly noise becomes a lot larger of a factor.
Yeah, it
You
changes
try to
the game.
Yeah, you try to equip things or unequip noisy armor so that you make less noise. You make less sound when it's raining because the rain drowns out your footsteps. And when there is an opportunity for a stealth move, then a noise becomes a lot more alarming.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
enemies
totally.
suddenly turn around and notice you, and
Uh-huh.
then you're in a battle.
And you
That's
can use it to your advantage with distractions too.
that's also true. Yeah, that's quite a strategy.
Yeah, well I do that
You
a
got
lot.
big plans there.
Yeah, I do that a lot where I'll set up like two bombs at opposite ends of like an encampment,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll set them both off, and then the enemies will kind of decide which ones to go to, and then I just pick them off.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because they notice the sound of bombs as well.
Yeah.
They'll walk toward them. Yeah. Let's see. Another good instance of noise as a hazard was a small bit of a game that I mentioned on the last episode, or on the Hidden Gems episode, forgive me. Wallace and Gromit Project Zoo.
Yes.
There's an episode there's a chapter of it in a warehouse where Gromit has to get through this storage maze to get to I believe a switch that he has to pull, and there are guards keeping watch. They are they're working for Feathers McGraw.
My favorite
And
villain.
That's explained eventually, but I won't go into why. You'll have to play it.
Yes, absolutely.
And in order to get past these guards, you have to do something classic from the Wrong Trousers episode or the Wrong Trousers film from Wallace and Gromit, where
such a good scene.
Gromit goes underneath this cardboard box, a la Solid Snake, with eyes cut out in the front, which just so happened to be the eyes of the logo of the dog food box.
It's so great. It's one of my favorite like visual gags in all of Wallace and Gromit. It's so good.
Yeah, yeah. And they bring this up. They use this in the video game.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is amazing. So you have to go around, move around in this box, stop when the guards are near you, and here's the cool thing. If they notice that the box is not or wasn't there before, then they're going to investigate it. Like if they come up against it, then they are going to spot you.
That's fantastic.
But they'll also hear you. They'll also turn around if they notice that you're making noise while you're moving.
That's sophisticated.
Yeah, it's rather sophisticated for a very small part of a chapter of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like they realized that would be pretty difficult in itself. Like it's a little mini game almost, but it was memorable for me.
I like that. I like that they're using like this in-joke kind of reference.
Yeah, yeah.
But they turned it into like a legitimate mechanic. A mini game.
Yeah.
That's totally fun.
Yeah.
And I think stealth, it's so easy to make it like tedious and horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like escort quests where you have to be stealthy are the worst. Like we have to like help another person be stealthy.
Mm-hmm. And you can never rely on that person.
Oh, no, you can't. Another thing I don't like is when you have companions in a game and you're like tiptoeing along and your companion's like, an enemy! Boom, boom, boom. I'm like, God, Boone from Fallout New Vegas, like, just sit down. Just deep breaths.
Yeah.
We'll get through this. Don't worry.
Right.
So when they can pull off stealth really well in a fun way, I'm super impressed.
Yeah.
If a game can do that, I'm really impressed.
Yeah, yeah. Here's a game that isn't necessarily stealth related, but it does involve noise as a hazard.
Yeah.
It's called Tattletale.
Oh, yeah.
It was a recent indie horror game about these little toys called Tattletales, which are very much like Furbies.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. And you carry one with you because it's like the key to solving this eldritch horror of a toy that has entered your house right before Christmas. And it tells you where to go. It tells you what to do. And you also have a flashlight. And you're walking around the house trying to avoid this horrific toy that's chasing you. Or not chasing you, but just like stalking you.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And you're always in danger. There are moments where it'll tell you like you need to be very careful not to make a sound.
Yeah.
It's not that you've got the element of stealth. You don't have an advantage here. You are in danger already.
Oh my God.
Which is an interesting mechanic. But if you don't make noise, you might not anger this toy and they might not rip your head off.
That's so scary.
Yeah.
That's so scary.
So what you have to do, you have to play with this Furby toy, this Tattletale, as though you have to keep it fed, you have to keep it brushed, you have to keep its batteries up.
An evil Tamagotchi.
Because if it doesn't get those things, it will start to complain for them. It'll start to go, brush me.
Oh my God.
And you have to do it because the other toy will hear this tattletale, and it's called a tattletale.
Oh,
it's tattling
so scary.
on you.
That's so funny.
And then as for the flashlight, you have a flashlight with limited battery. It will start to fade. You have to shake it to get it to light back up. And for anyone who has used a shakeable, chargeable flashlight, they're very noisy.
Oh my God.
And the game does an amazing job of making you realize of making you really mad at that flashlight.
I love this concept of a game that's so built around being conscious of the noises you're making.
Yes.
Because have you ever been in like a lecture class and you're really hungry and you brought a bag of chips with you and everybody's like enraptured?
Yes.
Actually, the better example for me as a film student is the first year film history first semester, and we're going through the silent film era, and I haven't eaten in like 6 hours, and I have a little bag of Lay's, and I'm like, I would just kill it a munch on this right now. But I can't because people are doing their thing up there and everyone is dead quiet. I love that because I think it's a socially awkward thing we go through a lot.
Right. Because it makes the sounds louder.
Yeah.
It makes you much more aware of the noise you're making.
Does.
And then these cheeky developers of Tattletale, they capitalize on that by making the sounds extremely loud.
Yeah, and kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like every time you need light, you just have to go for a second and hope that
shake weight.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's so funny. That's so great. I think that's. I wish there were more stealth-based games that centered around noise rather than visuals. I think there could be a lot of clever stuff done there.
Yeah, especially with how in depth we can get sound design to be in games these days, and how adaptive it can be. Yeah, there's an avenue to explore of the idea of either like not making noise or making a specific noise.
Yeah, in Hitman you can direct your noise. So you have a coin, you can toss it into a room and they'll go investigate the coin.
Yeah.
Or you can overflow a sink and wait for someone.
Right.
It's just so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, we already have things like that visually where you have to look a specific way or not look a specific way. Oh my goodness. So why not with sound a bit more?
Yeah. So we're running a little bit out of time, so I think I'm just gonna like sort of mention my last few if you want to do the same.
I'm actually done on my list.
Ooh,
so
okay. I really only had like 2 more.
Sure.
One of them was radiation in games. So
Yeah.
this really comes up in Fallout and Half-Life. It's a little more serious in Half-Life. It's not so much of a hazard. I mean, it is a hazard if you get too close of it, but I just think it's an interesting concept. I think radiation is a really... I used to be scared of radiation when I was a kid.
Radiation is scary. It's invisible.
It is, and I think the invisible danger thing could be used really fruitfully in games, and I kind of wish they would more. Another one is mimics. So this is like a fantasy thing. It's in tabletop RPGs a lot, but it's in Dark Souls, and it's really terrifying in Dark Souls. If you open sort of a wrong chest, it'll eat you, and it looks horrifying.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really scary, and it's annoying because like, you should be able to trust this. But and then the last one I wanted to talk about was in Oblivion. There's a specific quest where you can become a vampire kind of by accident. You get bitten, and if you don't cure yourself a certain way within I think 7 in-game days, you become a vampire and you can no longer go outside during the day, and I believe some people can see you, recognize you're a vampire, and want to kill you.
Oh.
So it makes not only traveling much more difficult, because you die pretty much instantly, and you have to kind of only do things at night. It makes interacting very difficult, and the quest is pretty hard to get the cure, and also, whoa, my voice cracked. I love having allergies. Sorry. And then you get uglier, which 11-year-old me was not happy about. And if you've played Oblivion, you know, everyone's pretty ugly already. And yes, it is possible to be uglier. So that's my last one.
All right.
Yeah, well, thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you very much for listening to our very hazardous episode of Hitbox.
I guess one last thing is we will be uploading our previous 3 episodes and this one this weekend. We won't be uploading them to the KCIA SoundCloud because it's not set up yet, but we'll be uploading them to one of our one of our personal accounts. We'll let you know like what site that's going to be on, but you'll be getting those within a day or 2.
We'll find a way.
We'll find a way and we'll let people know.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Have a wonderful Friday.
Yes, absolutely. And do you have any suggestions for
for music?
Music to play
Ooh.
off.
Let me think for a second here. Let's do Let's do some Untitled Goose Game.
Ooh. I know that soundtrack is mainly like, isn't it mainly Debussy, or is it?
It's similar. It's like styled to be like that.
Is this it?
I think so. All right. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes.
Have a great rest of your night.
This is
Marley.
a very contrastingly non-hazardous song.
But when you get discovered, when someone sees you, it goes, bah. It's really scary.
Ah. Well, we'll leave it on here.
All right. I'm Marley.
I'm Scruffy.
And thank you for listening to Hitbox.
Yes.